Okay. Well, welcome everybody. This is the Type 1 and Midlife group coaching membership. And today, we have some guests that are joining us because we've got a popular guest in our T1D space, Ginger Vieira, and we're so happy that you all decided to join us on a holiday. I put this date on the calendar like 3 months ago, and I'm like, what happened? But luckily, I don't know about you all, but this tends to be my chill day. We play over the weekend, and Monday's just kind of so to me, I think it's the perfect time. So anyway, so Ginger, welcome. You are a dear friend. I've gotten to know you over the years. You've been on my podcast a handful of times, and you have some amazing books. Today, we really want to talk about exercise, which is a big deal. And it's an important thing, as we all know. And if you're here, chances are you enjoy exercising, and maybe there's a barrier to how much you're getting or your relationship with exercise. So that's one of the things that Ginger's going to kind of help talk about today. So go ahead and introduce yourself. And once again, we're going to keep everybody on mute, and feel free to turn your cameras on. We love to see your faces.
Yeah,
And
keep the cameras
we,
on.
yeah. And then we can open it up for questions when we are kind of done. So I'm going to mute those of you just so we don't have any background noise. And Ginger, the floor is all yours.
Right. Unfortunately, the most background noise might be coming from my two children, who are 2 rooms away
Oh,
and yet quite loud. Um, Hi, everybody. My
mhm.
name is Ginger. I've lived with type 1 for about 25 years. I also have celiac. I just found out last week that my 10-year-old has celiac. That's a whole
Oh,
unfortunate other topic, but I also have fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, which I developed while I was pursuing competitive powerlifting in my early 20s. And so I always want to mention that because when you look at people who've got their fitness routine down, it's easy to assume that it's easy for them, right? And that it was easy to make that happen. And I've had some tremendous obstacles to the point where, I literally, the only thing I could do for many years was walk my dogs after several years of being a competitive athlete because everything left me in a lot of pain or left me just deeply exhausted, like dysfunctionally exhausted if I exercised. If I did any fun exercise, really, like, and I mean just jogging or even like lifting 15-pound dumbbells. So it took me years to get past that and be able to be more active today. So the biggest thing that really helps me thrive with type 1 is that I've just never kind of let the status quo of what the doctors tell you what's possible and what the doctors are teaching you kind of be the last thing, right? It's always there's so much more to learn. And so everything I've just always approached it as like a little experiment. Like, all right, let's see if jumping rope 5 minutes a day, if I can get away with that with fibro and chronic fatigue, and how does it affect my blood sugar? How does it affect my insulin needs hours later? It's always an experiment. It's never pass or fail for me. And I really think that mindset is what helps me continue to thrive because I'm trying things. If it doesn't work, it's not my fault. I don't blame myself. Oh, I tried to be a swimmer and I couldn't keep up with it. Oh, I hate swimming. That's okay. Let's go find something else. Right. So when it comes to insulin, it's the same idea. But I'll stop there. That's my brief intro. I don't know if that was
yeah.
even an intro.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And this would probably a perfect opportunity if you want to just type in the chat, what is your current exercise routine? Or do you have an exercise routine? Yeah, just share as much as you'd like to share, and we'll look at those answers and just kind of
Ah,
talk
I would
through
love
them.
to see that.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm a very similar to you. I have always been an exerciser, and I can't imagine life without moving every day. And I feel very fortunate for that relationship with exercise, and having a disease where exercise, I mean, can impact your blood sugar. both high and low, as we both, know. So what do you know? Because I know in your book, the book Exercising with Type 1 Diabetes is so good. And if you all don't have it, definitely grab a copy of it. I love how relatable it is and easy to read, and you can just reference your way through it as far as different aspects of types of exercise, how to do it, meal timing, all the things. You did such a great job of breaking it down, and it's actionable. It's not like a
Yeah.
book where
It's only
you're like, oh
100
my
pages, right?
gosh.
It's simple. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really important, I think. And so maybe if we just start there with, what does exercise do to our blood sugar?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing
Wide
you
open question,
said, I
right?
mean, you said earlier, like you've always been active. I wasn't always active. And so,
Mm,
what I learned and what I saw in my own insulin doses when I started making daily exercise a priority around 19 years old, I dabbled in exercise here and there as a teenager. I did different stuff. I would walk 5 miles to work sometimes if I was bored, but it wasn't something consistent, right? And when I
mm,
consistently started walking every day and weightlifting every week, and I saw basically my long acting insulin dose went from 32 units a day down to 10 units a day.
mm, mm.
And there's no magic in there. That was just from exercising. And
Yeah.
obviously, I lost weight as I continued on that journey. But that tells you so much about what exercise does for you. And now, even today, whereas, I hang out steady at that 10 units, if I don't, I always wake up and walk my dog. So here's my current exercise routine. I wake up every morning, get my kids to school, walk my dogs a mile and a half or so. If it's the weekend, I might do a 2.5 mile walk in the morning. And then I usually jump rope for 30 minutes. And I do all of this before I've even eaten breakfast. And I do it purposely before I've eaten breakfast because I like fasted exercise, which I do explain in more detail on my book or on YouTube. Um, but we'll get into the science of fasted exercise if you'd like to. But if I don't get that 30-minute jump rope session, I need twice as much insulin at lunch.
Mhm.
That jump rope session is usually around 8 o'clock. I need twice as much insulin at 12 or 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
That tells you so much about what exercise does for you every day as a woman with type 1, and obviously a man too, but they can take care of themselves. Who cares about them?
Today it's all about us, right?
Yeah. And then I walk my dog again. My dogs, I have three. I walk them again later in the afternoon, another mile and a half or so. And so every other day, I try to do 2 to 3 times a day, 2 to 3 times a week, forgive me, of light weights, but I'm very limited there. I only do like 15 minutes, but 15 minutes can go a long way. So that's another thing of, I used to be a competitive power lifter. I was lifting weights 4 hours a week. Now I get about 1 hour total a week or less, to be honest. And
Yeah.
I'm still maintaining muscle, right?
Yeah.
But don't underestimate that power of just 15 minutes is
Yeah.
absolutely better than zero. And then a few days a week, I might jog to the gym before I do my weights. I live about a mile from the gym. So that's a lot of exercise. I do realize that, but all of it is pretty steady and mellow. I'm not trying to break PRs. I'm not tracking my time or my pace on anything. I'm just seizing the opportunity to be active. And what you're doing for your insulin sensitivity is so critical, especially as we go through our 30s and 40s. I'm 39, around 35, I absolutely saw that shift in insulin sensitivity. And for that reason, I think it's so important that we as women make this like part of our religion, that it is just, and you have to teach your family. My kids know I'm not going to stop jumping rope on a Saturday morning because they want waffles. Maybe when I'm done, right? But you teach the people around you, this is my routine and it matters, and I'm not going to skip it just because you guys want something from me.
Yeah. Yeah, consistency is so key, which is definitely something
Critical.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the older we get, I know we really talk about this a lot inside of our group and our membership here. It's not about being perfect. It's just trying to find those things. And you talk about some of this in some of your books and even in what you share online. The eating, the sleep, hydration. I know it sounds boring, ladies, but when those things are prioritized, it really does make everything fall in place. And obviously, blood sugar is our ultimate goal. So, again, doing the best we can. And I think,
And even on that, I
yeah,
just want to add that,
mhm,
it doesn't have to be 100% prioritized all day long. Like I'd
mhm,
say the first 2/3 of my day are pretty consistent with that exercise routine. I like intermittent fasting. I tend to fast until 1 o'clock, and then I have an apple and peanut butter. And just by creating that much consistency in my day from waking up until about 2 o'clock, it makes my diabetes obviously easier to manage because I have a better idea of what to expect, right? It's not always perfect, as you know. Every day is a little different, but it does create that consistency, which makes it easier. And then it's also creating that consistency for my metabolism and for
yeah,
maintaining my weight. And I think it's just hugely critical. And then dinner is something different every day. And I eat dessert pretty much 7 days a week, right? But I got in all that exercise. So I don't worry about weight gain by eating dessert 7 days a week because I know that my body burned plenty of calories that day.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And obviously, yeah, the sooner we can just recognize this, I think it's just recognizing what's going to help us and just, yeah, like you said, just doing the best we can with that. Let's talk about the types of exercise, because I think this is probably the biggest question we're getting, especially as we're getting older, because the hormones, again, that's that other variable that's impacting our sensitivity to insulin. So, and just to clarify what sensitivity means, it means that our body better utilizes and Ginger, I know you're much better at words than I am when it comes to these terms because you're in the space and you're a writer. But it's basically how our body utilizes insulin. It's not that we can't use it. It's just the efficiency of it.
Yeah,
And
you need less to do the same job
there you
because
go.
exercise
Yeah.
is taking up sugar too, right? It's driving how quickly your cells take up sugar. So you need less insulin to help do the same job.
Yeah, yeah. And it
That's
gets
that's
harder
a
as
good
we know.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we know resistance kicks in after the age, even after the age 35, like you mentioned, but definitely after the age of 40, when our cycles are getting more irregular, we're really starting to notice the difference. And that really does kind of lead to really the beginning of perimenopause. So steady state, we know, and we all know this. If we take a walk after dinner or before dinner, and if you compare a day that you did and a day that you didn't, and again, we know meals are different,
Yeah.
insulin
Insulin
on board, all those
lowering.
other factors are different, but the impact of steady state on glucose is pretty profound. I mean, there is no joke about that. I mean, so what do you say with that when it comes to measuring that and recognizing that?
I mean, I think that instead of getting bogged down in like, well, I gotta make sure I'm doing X, Y, and Z or this many minutes of steady state, figure out what you love doing and what you're physically able to do. Somebody just brought up that they are limited by a foot tendon thing. So
Mhm.
walks are limited, and I don't know if I'm veering off your topic, Melissa, but
No, it's okay. That's
it
okay.
brings up the perfect
Yeah.
point of another way to maintain insulin sensitivity that's so critical for women in mid-age is weightlifting. So even though I'm not trying to build big muscles here, right? It's still when you are breaking down muscle in the gym with lifting weights, you are
Mhm.
increasing your insulin sensitivity for temporary, for the hours just after when your body has to recover and rebuild from that, and long term by adding a little bit of more muscle to your body. So you're permanently increasing your metabolism and increasing your insulin sensitivity. So it's not just cardio. So if you can't do more intense than walking, that's okay. Go to the gym and use those circuit machines.
Yeah.
Even 15 minutes, you're going to see a huge impact on your insulin doses hours later, which of course is tricky. I explain this. I'm going to drop a link here too. I have a free 5-day email course that is kind of a simplified version of the book that takes you through some of the biggest things to know if you're having trouble getting started. Because the hardest thing about changing up your exercise routine is just keeping your insulin doses adjusted so you're not crashing all the time. I actually, this week, I purposefully took a break from jumping rope for 4 days in a row. I have a tear in my hip that I'm getting an injection in next week, and it was really hurting. And by day, so I obviously needed more insulin at lunch, but by day 4, my insulin needs were so much more, my blood sugars were so much more stubborn, and I
Mhm.
needed already like a 10%, 20% increase in my long-acting insulin after just 4 days of not
Yeah,
getting that additional exercise.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I want to add to the resistance training. I always like to call it because we don't always see the results right away, and we'll talk about insulin needs right away. But it's like a deposit in the bank, isn't it? It's like again, it's about consistency and starting and trying to not only build muscle, but maintain muscle. But and Ginger, you and I are good examples. I've been lifting weights probably 40, 45 years. I mean, I've been doing it forever. It's just always been part of my routine. And I
Yeah.
know it's my secret sauce. And I'm just lucky that I love doing it. And as I'm getting older, I'm getting stronger, but I'm having to force myself to lift a little heavy, not force myself, but intentionally put that on my kind of my radar that
Mhm.
again, we want to keep those muscles stronger. And it does take a little bit more work when we're getting older. But again, it
Yeah.
takes time. This is a kind of a side kind of a topic with this, and we're not going to talk directly today about the exact routines and weight training and all of that. That's definitely something that you need to be coached on and guided on to do it safely and to progressively do it, um, in in respect to your abilities. So that's definitely something. But we will test that it's a great advantage for us women.
I mean, just hang out with, I've trained some people as a personal trainer who were much older, who were just starting to lift weights. And I
Mm,
actually spend every Tuesday with my best friend's grandmother. She's 92 and she has not been exercising, I mean, really ever. And just lifting her leg up to get into the car is brutal, right? And if she had been walking and even just doing 10 minutes, right, every other day with circuit machines, it matters. So you have to, like you said, that deposit in the bank, you have to let go of the hoping for immediate visible results and just do it knowing that that long-term impact is really what you're doing it for.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So on that note, let's talk about what resistance training does to blood sugar.
Yeah. So it depends on it's not cut and dry that strength training is going to spike your blood sugar. It depends on the intensity, how much insulin you have on board. So if I just ate a meal and I took all the insulin for that meal, and then I go do a half an hour of high rep, meaning a lighter weight that I can do 15 to 20 reps of, I
Mm,
might see my blood sugar drop down because I have so much insulin on board and I'm doing higher rep. If I have that same amount of insulin on board, but I'm lowering the reps. Let's say it's heavy enough that I can only do 8 to 10 repetitions in one set. That's where you might get into seeing more of an increase in your blood sugar. And a big part of it, people think it's adrenaline, but you're not really having an adrenaline rush when you're at the gym by yourself. Adrenaline is very, like, that's a real trigger. That's a serious fight or flight hormone. That's more in competition, or, an intense CrossFit class or a soccer game. What's really spiking your blood sugar during weightlifting is lactic acid being converted into glucose.
mm,
But in those of us with type 1, we aren't producing extra insulin to go along with that extra glucose. So our body's trying to make that glucose to cycle it back to your muscles for fuel, but it doesn't have the extra insulin to go along with it. So that doesn't mean you immediately start taking insulin when you start a new strength training routine. You test it out and you see what happens. Okay, if 3 times in a row I did this workout and my blood sugar is spiking every time, now I know I might need a tiny bolus along with that workout. but you wait to get the proof. I met this one gal when I was at a diabetes camp. She was like, "Oh, I love CrossFit, but I had to quit because it just spikes my blood sugar so bad. And I don't want to take insulin while I'm exercising. That seems totally counterproductive." Like, no, no. If you didn't have diabetes, you'd be
Mhm.
producing extra insulin during a CrossFit workout. And that's your body supporting your
Yeah.
muscles and supporting muscle growth. So she quit CrossFit because she saw her blood sugar rising, which was so heartbreaking to me. So don't get out of that mindset of insulin is bad. Like, yes, we want to generally need less insulin by boosting our insulin sensitivity with regular exercise, but insulin is also the most powerful hormone. And when we do really need it, we do really need it. And it can help boost your metabolism in other ways by helping you build muscle, right?
Mhm.
So it's not black and white.
Really good points. Yeah, yeah, I like that story. And her story is very common. I hear a lot of ladies saying
Yeah.
that same thing. And there generally is an experience. It sounds like she had something that happened to her, obviously the CrossFit, that
Yeah.
just triggered her and said, yeah, because as women, we're going to the gym because we want to stay active, we want to maintain our weight. With blood sugar, obviously, that's a kind of a side benefit to help control blood sugar. But it does seem counterintuitive if
Yeah.
we are having to eat because our blood sugar goes down. That's another thing. Oh, I don't want to have to stop and eat. Well, what's the point of working out if I've got to eat? And I think that really is when we got to look at the relationship as to why we want to move our body. And obviously, food and insulin are always going to be a part of what we got to do every day. And it's just like you say, it's an experiment. And it's really
Yeah.
trying to figure out what that workout is going to need from you, whether it's a little insulin, a
Well,
little food.
and I mean, and if you do have to
Yeah,
eat every time because you're crashing during any type of exercise, that means you need to prepare better beforehand. Like,
right.
okay, here and there if you have some lows during exercise, but if it's every time and you find yourself just having to chug food, there are things you can do beforehand to minimize how much insulin you have on board so that
Yeah.
you're not going low. I don't really have low blood sugars during exercise anymore because I understand now the timing of my morning workouts. I don't even think about going low. I know I'm not going to because I have my background insulin, my basal long-acting dose fine-tuned to be as low as possible. And I know that I can walk for an hour and I don't drop. And then more so, I actually have to look for rising because I still haven't eaten breakfast. And it's by
Mhm.
8:30, 9 o'clock, my liver will start to put out a little glucose. Then later in the afternoon, when I'm going to jog to the gym, which I'm going to do after this, I have to think about, has it been 4 hours since I took an injection of rapid acting insulin? And if it has, that means I am potentially at risk of going low during my 1 mile jog to the gym. It's only a mile to get there. But if I have 3 units on board from an apple and peanut butter at 1 o'clock and I'm jogging at 3, I'm going to go low if I don't eat some other food. Or I can push my jog out another hour. That would minimize it. Or I can have a little snack before I go. Right. So it's all timing, but you shouldn't have to feel like you are eating everything you just burned. What you're missing is understanding the science and how to adjust things. And the biggest thing, two things I want to add. The biggest thing most people don't do when they start exercising more is they don't decrease their basal insulin. You need nearly an immediate reduction in your long acting or your basal rates in your pump, immediate. And it might be, maybe the first day 10%, maybe by the next day a 25% reduction. And if you're exercising consistently, this is another reason why I do it every day and I try to be pretty habitual about it, is because that becomes my new normal, right? So instead of having exercise days where I need to think about getting less basal on board, my new normal is just this is my insulin sensitivity. Because even if I miss one day, that's not enough to change my normal. Does that make sense?
It
So,
sure does.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then the other thing to remember is when you do lift weights, even 15, 30 minutes, that meal that's a few hours later, if you take your full usual dose for that meal, you're probably going to crash.
Mhm.
And it's your body recovering from what you just did, right? You broke down all that muscle. Now your body is trying to cycle sugar to those cells and rebuild those cells. So you need less insulin. You are more sensitive to insulin because your muscles are just soaking it up. They don't need as much help from the insulin to deal with it. One of the worst lows I ever had was when I was training in powerlifting and I forgot to cut my dinner dose in half. I trained at like 3 or 4 o'clock and I was eating dinner at 6 or 7 and I took the full dose. Normally I was cutting it in half and it hit me so hard and so fast. I crawled to the kitchen counter, poured dry oatmeal into my mouth because the only thing I could reach. This is before CGMs. This is 20 years ago. And I woke up face first in the carpet.
Mm.
So the oatmeal did kick in eventually, but you can imagine that probably took a while. So anyway, be very aware
Yeah.
of that. If it means underdosing, to prevent lows, but you end up a little high at first, right? In the beginning stages of your experiment, that's more ideal than crashing, right? So you're like, okay, I'm at 200 after that meal. I cut my dose back too much. Now, next time I do that workout and then dinner, I'm only going to reduce my dinner dose by 25% instead of
Yeah.
50%. So
Mhm.
always err on the side of caution to prevent lows first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I invite you to type any questions you have right here in the chat. And Kashish, you are asking what exercise routine should be followed by kids. Now, I'm assuming you have a child with type 1. If that's correct. So what things we're talking about today are just yes, she does. So similar,
That's a lot
but
trickier,
it's
right?
trickier, right?
I mean, the most important thing is first kids should get to be kids, right? So the biggest thing, Kashish, is that your child's basal background insulin dose is accurate. And by accurate, I mean just their kind of default level. And that's hard in a kid because it's always changing. So as they get older, right, and as they approach puberty and teen years, they're going to need more. But you don't want them to be, it's better for any of us to have less basal insulin on board and taking more with meals, right? So if your child can't go for a 5-10 minute walk without a dramatic amount of carbohydrates added, they're on way too much basal insulin. And that's the first kind of thing. But kids in general, they don't need to be on an exercise routine. They just need to go be active. And I know that's crazy hard with type 1. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. They're like, I never know what they're going to be doing, right? But
Yeah.
that's why also we don't ask kids to be as tight of a range as adults, right? Because you are trying to let kids be kids. Um, I think the more you can anticipate and keep their meal boluses back by 75% and make sure that they're not getting too much basal insulin just generally, right? The more you can prevent those lows without them having to constantly eat extra food. But it's trying to anticipate just like in an adult, I need to think about the fact that, well, yeah, after this event with Melissa, I want to jog to the gym. So I needed to think about that when I ate lunch. Because if I have 4 units of Novolog on board, I cannot jog to the gym without eating more food, which I don't like doing. So I'm sorry that's not an easy question for your child, but I would encourage you to, how old is your child, Kashish?
He's 10.
10? Okay. I would encourage you, and I know you probably have a great pediatric endocrinologist too, to let him be as active as he wants and gradually learn together how to cut his insulin doses down in the moment and overall in anticipation of that activity. The worst thing for a kid with type 1 is to try to, tell them they can't go do X, Y, and Z because, and exercise wise. Um, is he on a pump?
No,
No? Okay. Good.
injected insulin.
Okay. It might be worth
In
trying a pump for kids that can be so huge because you can suddenly set a temp basal rate. And, I'm not on a pump, but I'm 39 and I love to meticulously plan my day, right? But for a child, being on a pump means he can say, Mom, I'm going to go swimming at Jimmy's house. And you can be like, okay, here's a temp basal rate so that you have less insulin on board while you're swimming or while you're biking with your friend. it's important to be able to micromanage that. So think about it. You can even try one, and if he hates it, you give it back.
In India, we are not having really good pumps. Surely we will be having in further more years.
Okay.
Then we'll shift him onto the pumps.
Okay. Cool. And you know what you are getting in India, although not for 10-year-olds, but soon, hopefully, is inhaled insulin. If one of my children developed inhaled insulin, I would hoard mine, which I already kind of do, and I would start giving inhaled insulin to them because it's in and out so fast that you don't have to worry as much about lows. But that's a whole other topic.
Hopefully we'll getting a cure soon.
Yeah, so that would be nice too.
That
Yes.
would be nice. Yes, yes, we can always stay hopeful. And just like, this is Carrie's a good example. Her and I are we're about the same 43 years, 42 years with type 1. So just know that everything's going to be fine and you have got technology on your side. We did not have that growing up as children. So, and we're doing very well.
We
So,
are having angels like
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So technology and hope is on your
Yeah,
side.
I always say to parents, my blood sugars have not been perfect over the last 25 years, and
No.
I'm living my life. I'm
It's
not blind. I have all my fingers and toes. So perfection is not the goal. It's
right.
somewhere in
Really
between,
good point.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Does anybody want to unmute and ask any questions? We're here for you. Carrie, did you want to? Oh, hold on a second. Let me see if I can get you to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, there you are.
Yeah. Oh, good. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. One of my frustrations is, well, I'm on a pump, a tandem pump, but yeah, sometimes in the afternoon, if you just like, sometimes you just want to be spontaneous and go for a 2-mile walk, and
Mhm.
it's frustrating, like all the planning you have to do. But I mean, I'm a lifetime exerciser too. I think that's what's kept me so healthy in all these years. But yeah, sometimes I feel like I wish I could just be more spontaneous and go for a 2-mile jog or a run without all the preparation and then go low. That's one
Yeah.
of my frustrations. But I mean, I guess it is what it is. But
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing that supports that spontaneity is making sure you're not getting too much basal insulin. And I know
right.
it's really hard to explain to people because I've made a lot of people who are taking too much basal and then they don't need as much with their meals. So if you reduce your basal, you might need to take more with meals, but that's better because that
Right.
gives you more flexibility. And then you can just walk out the door with a
Yeah.
basal rate, right? And
Yeah.
not be as dependent on food to get you through a 2-mile walk.
Yeah. Yeah,
So I
exactly.
would look at that. And I know it's unfortunately one of the hardest things to go do. But it starts with trial and error. And I know that there are if I know that, like we all have I have a 5-pound kind of window that my weight sort of goes through. And if I'm at the higher end of that 5-pound window, then I need 11 units of long acting. If I'm at the lower end of that 5-pound window, I might only need 9 units of long.
Mhm.
So it's that understanding that little detail in your body and trying to get your basal insulin as low as possible and then take more bolus where you need it.
Yeah. I wished I had your book when I was back in college. It's so awful. I love exercise so much way back then. I mean, we didn't have CGMs, and it's so terrible. I'm so thankful I don't have really complications, but yeah, I would tend to keep my sugars higher so that I could exercise. And I had to rethink and relearn how to exercise with normal blood sugars. It's been a long lifetime process. And I know I'm not the only one.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's so common. And you
but
did that out of
oh,
survival. Not you did that was
yeah,
the choice you had back then.
yeah. The
Yeah.
best advice the doctor gave me back then was to exercise every day. And I was like, well, great. But then you only took one shot a day back then or whatever. I mean, it was just so hard to control. So
It
it
was.
keep your sugars running higher so you could do it. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
You didn't even have the
anyways,
tools that would have made that
yeah,
possible. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, you just have to kind of rethink and relearn things. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. But yeah, we needed your book way back then, Ginger. Right,
Probably
Melissa?
like 5 years old. Yeah.
Right. That
Yeah.
is so true. That is so true.
Oh.
One thing
Yeah.
that really helps me, if there isn't somebody else about to ask a question, is fasted exercise. And I'll give you just a
Yeah.
snapshot of it. I have free videos on YouTube about this and articles as well. And then there's more detail in the book. But
Mhm.
when you exercise in a fasted state, it means you don't have a bolus of insulin on board for a meal. And we know that Novolog, Humalog, Fiasp hangs out for about 4 hours. Everybody's a little different. It could be like 3 to 5, depending on, how your body processes insulin. But that 4 hour window tells you, okay, this insulin I took back here for lunch has the risk of driving my blood sugar down. So if I plan my meal to be at least 4 hours before I want to exercise, then I'm dramatically reducing my risk of lows. So my second dog walk of the day, I usually try to time it for before I eat lunch at 1 p.m. because it's again another round of exercise where I do not even worry about my blood sugar going down. The
Yeah.
amount of time I spend treating lows is so significantly lower because I practice fasted exercise, because I'm not battling this tug of war with Novolog on board.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
and you can create that same environment at 7 p.m. So when my kids were babies, my primary exercise opportunity to jump rope was 7 o'clock after they went to bed. Now, my husband didn't like that because he wanted me to cook dinner and like couch with him. We're divorced. So, that's how that went. But I would put them in bed. I made sure that the last time I ate before that was at least before 4 o'clock. And if I really, ideally 3 o'clock, but if I was hungry at 3:30, I would just choose a really low carb snack like carrots and cheese so that I didn't have to take a lot of insulin for it. So then I could jump rope to my heart's content at 7 and I didn't go low.
Mm.
So one thing you could do is, I like carbs. I eat carbs every day. But if I want to have evening, afternoon flexibility, then that would mean, all right, make your lunch one of your low carb meals. Save your carbs for a different meal. I love dessert, right? But I never eat dessert in the middle of the day because it's like throwing this giant wild card into my, I'm eating something different every time. I don't no idea what the carb count is in the gluten-free cake balls that I made for my child's birthday yesterday. And I don't want to try to add that on top of insulin and then running to the gym and hope it all works out. Like those things are hard enough to deal with at 9 p.m. when I'm sitting on my butt on the couch. So
Yeah.
think about how you can control those little factors to make it a little easier for when you might want to go on a spontaneous walk. And then you won't have as much to think about. And eating a low carb lunch is a really good way, or eating the same thing for lunch every day. I know how that apple and peanut butter affects my blood sugar. I know that if I do want to do the dog walk after, I know how to cut my dose down for the apple and peanut butter because I eat it every day.
Yeah.
Mm.
Really
Yeah.
good examples. Planning and paying attention to the trends and what our body does. And and then, when we find things that work, repeat. Something that I notice, and I'll use an example of a workout that I do. I've been doing this for about a year, probably a year and a half, and I've got back into doing classes at my gym. So Saturday morning, and I'm like clockwork because I love this. It's an 8 a.m. cycle class. And I used to do a 6:30. This is kind of a good example of how the response can just be different. And again, that's just my response. But that 6:30 a.m. cycle class would just wreck my blood sugar. It was too early. My cortisol, the timing of it just never worked. I tried it a few times. It just never worked. But the Saturday 8 a.m., it is magic. Not only do I can, and I do not eat, so it's fasted. I do collagen in my coffee. I talk a lot about that here inside the group. I love my collagen in the coffee. So that's just giving us that little bit of a protein, a little bit of something, a little substance, before the workout. And I am just coasting through the cycle class. And then I do some weight training about 30 minutes after that. So I'm usually home about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, my time. And I'll tell you what, my Saturdays, and I could probably look at my trend report, my Saturdays are the best time and range
Hmm.
of any day of the week. It proves your point. And again, that's my response. That's what works for me. So you know what I tell myself all the time? Well, why don't I just do an 8 a.m. class every day, right? We can't always do that, just depending on our schedule or whatever. But it's a good example of your body tells you what works. And when you're consistent with those little factors around that class, the before, during, and after, and it's just such a great feeling when you can get it dialed in that way. And then, the results just pay off for the rest of the day and even the next day,
Yes.
because we talked about putting that deposit in the bank, and this is a weekend. So, you know, who says you can't stay on track on the weekends too?
Mhm.
I try to give myself one day on the weekend where I kind of throw my routine out the window. And sometimes I'm still on part of my routine, but I don't really try. I'll just, see, I might eat waffles at noon. And like,
Yeah.
I usually regret it because I'm like, oh, this is harder than my apple and peanut butter. But well, it's just
Right.
giving yourself that
Right.
flexibility and
Right.
have
Yeah.
that little
And
regimen.
it's important to pay attention to the feedback because our CGMs, our body, obviously our blood sugar, it's giving us the feedback. So we've got to just keep our eyes and our heart open to that feedback without beating ourselves up over what didn't result the way we wanted to, and then learn from it. And then, how can we do it differently the next time? And that's really life with diabetes, isn't it?
That reminds me of my favorite Bruce Lee quote. I'm typing it in the thing. Take what works and leave the rest. It doesn't matter if Jenny on Instagram said that her keto diet changed her life. If your
Yeah.
keto diet doesn't work for you, just take what you learned from it that might work for you a little bit. Like maybe you found a great meal you love that is extremely low carb. Put that as your lunch, but have your carbs at dinner if you go nuts without carb. I've experimented with nearly all of those extreme. I even did the high carb, ultra low fat raw food diet just to see what those wackos were talking about. Anyone who loves it. I lasted a week. I felt like a bean. I felt like my whole body had become a starchy bean. But yeah, do you become very insulin sensitive? Sure, but that doesn't mean I felt good or healthy doing it, nor does it like mean that it translates to long-term health. So if somebody else loves their keto diet, great. But I know that I start to go mentally nuts if I don't get to eat chocolate and an apple every day or pizza or whatever. You know what I mean? But I balance that with being really consistent during the day so that I have more flexibility some nights
Yeah.
with those other things.
Yeah, I like that.
Can I ask Ginger another question?
Sure, Carrie.
Yeah. Ginger, so because like for the most part, it sounds like you now enjoy the morning exercise and then the afternoon exercise. Like for your evening routine, do you mostly, you eat your dinner and then you have your dessert? Do you mostly just kind of relax for the rest of the day with no exercise? Is that just kind of
Well,
you
now
just
that my I just got I got an injection in my hip. I had 2 tears in my hip. So
uh-huh.
3 days a week I'm trying to jog to the gym and do my weights. And so those 3 days, that's pretty late it's like the end of the day, right? It's like
Uh-huh.
4 o'clock. When I first started being able to do that again because the first tear was healing, I forgot, like, oh, this is going to dramatically impact your insulin sensitivity for dinner and dessert and then overnight. And so I took too much insulin. I had some good lows at midnight.
Oh,
Yeah. So I really, because that's not an everyday thing, it's a new thing for my brain to be like, hey, you got to really remember when you're dosing dinner that you did run to the gym today and you ran back,
yeah.
And I trot like an old lady, right? Like this is not some intense workout. I increase my weights at the gym about once every 2 years, and I'm not even kidding because of my fibro and my chronic fatigue. So I'm doing the same stuff and it doesn't matter. It's helping me maintain muscle, building bit by bit, and boosting my insulin sensitivity. Like, whoa, I'm
Mm.
not pushing myself because I literally cannot or I'll get sick, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm trying to, because I've always used to be an evening exerciser. I'm not so much anymore, but I'm just working on being able to eat my dinner. I might go for a 5 or 6 minute walk, but then I just want to relax in the evening and have good blood sugars and not have to walk or do, like a 40-minute work. I'm just trying to keep my blood sugars good in the evening. So I was just asking, can you keep your blood sugars, kind of steady when you've exercised earlier? I'm trying to like relax and
You
just,
know, for me, I'd say my blood sugars are less predictable in the evening because I eat my less predictable meals in the evening.
uh-huh.
To go out with my best friend or my partner, and that's when I'm gonna order a gluten-free pizza at the wood-fired Vermont hipster pizza place.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's a crapshoot every time. I'm not taking
Okay.
notes. I eat a different amount of slices every time. So for me, that's where I put the wild card food because I'm not gonna go for a walk
Yeah.
or a jog after a
Yeah.
7 p.m. dinner,
Yeah.
right?
Do you ever feel anxious? Like say your blood sugar hits 200, do you ever feel anxious? Like, oh no, or are you just,
Absolutely.
yeah,
No, absolutely. I want my graph to be perfect. I want it to
right.
be perfect, right? But that's not healthy. That's not
Right.
sustainable for us. I hate when I see that thing, but I try to
Yeah.
talk myself through like, okay, there's actually, and I know Melissa had this in our notes for today. And I'll throw it in here really quick. There's actually 5 other hormones that we don't produce normal amounts of. Our body doesn't regulate these other hormones that impact appetite, how quickly your stomach empties the food you digested into your bloodstream. So we empty our food into our bloodstream more quickly, which means harder post-meal spikes. We don't
Right.
feel as full when we're eating because, so basically, the beta cells, which make insulin, those cells are supposed to communicate to the alpha cells and gamma cells and epsilon cells, which manage these other hormones. So we're not getting that communication to these other cells that manage these other hormones that regulate also how much sugar our liver is producing. So we all overproduce sugar. So we're taking extra insulin just to manage that extra sugar that our liver is making, which makes it that much harder for us to manage our weight. And
Mm.
that is why I take metformin and I take a teeny dose of Ozempic. 0.15. I hack the pen I pull out. 15
I-
units in an insulin syringe is 0.15. And it doesn't make me lose weight. I'm the same weight as when I started, but it helps calm down my liver, calm down my appetite.
Right.
Before that, I knew I was always hungry. I figured it had something to do with type 1 diabetes, and I just learned not to trust my own hunger cues and to
Mm.
ignore them, right? And that was exhausting.
Yeah.
So I have videos about GLP-1s and metformin on my diabetes nerd.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you do. Your YouTube is unbelievable. I just linked an episode we did. It was episode 64 on this topic. So it was beyond insulin, and we talked about these hormones that Ginger just mentioned as well. So I just linked it here, and you can check it out. Listen in.
Good.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Got kind of a quiet group today, but I'm so glad you all made it today. And I will be sending a follow-up email to everybody with the recording and all these links that we featured. So those that weren't able to join us live can have access to the links. Because obviously you can't do that when you don't see the chat box. So, and if there's no other questions today, I think we did round it off pretty well. Carrie, anything? I know exercise is something that you and I talk through it quite a bit personally
Yeah.
in our time together inside the group, and I'm real proud of the initiative you're taking.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and yeah,
did I
she's
answer
talking to
your
this.
questions, Carrie?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. No, I wished I could erase like the
Mm.
time when I was first diagnosed, and then like the college years of but I was just always trying to do good, and I just loved exercise so much.
Yeah.
And I wished I didn't have those high sugars. I wish I could erase those sugars, but I can't. So you
Well, you
just
got to
got,
forgive yourself for that because you did
yeah.
what you really, I mean, you did not have the tools to do anything else.
No, it's
Yeah.
crazy. Even when we were pregnant, I wished I had a CGM, but
Mm.
by gosh, I'm still here
I
Mm.
know.
and
Good example.
Yeah.
doing
And you know,
good.
regular exercise also, I don't know the exact science to explain this well, but it improves all of our blood vessels and protects us, not just from the blood sugar standpoint, but it protects our cells from the damage of high blood sugars.
Yes.
I was powerlifting all the time. I got this free eye exam. It was like a really fancy one they were doing at this diabetes conference. And the doctor looked in the back of my eyes and he said, "Oh, I can tell you exercise a lot." And I was like, "Really?" And there's something
Yeah.
about our cells that he could see that was the result of just consistent exercise. So,
That's wonderful.
yeah, the best
Yeah.
thing you could do to compensate for those college years is be active every day.
Yeah, it was actually, I was diagnosed one day before I turned 14. And back then it was an optometrist that said, Carrie, the best thing you can ever do for yourself is exercise. That's my best advice, I
Oh,
think, with my diabetes is exercise every day of your life. Well, by gosh,
mm.
I've taken the advice
Wow, good.
and it's
Okay.
paid
Yeah.
off. And
That's so
so
funny that that's the, I mean, I don't think we don't normally think of optometrists as understanding that connection, but we
that,
both
and that's
have.
what he said back in, maybe that was
True.
1982 when I got my first
Wow.
eye checkup. But I took that to heart, and
Yeah.
Ginger, here I am.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
Love it.
Melissa,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
yeah.
story.
Cool.
Really good. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up today. Well, thanks for everybody that was here. And if you weren't here today, hello. And you'll be watching this recording. And yeah, just keep an eye on your inbox for more information. And I'm going to link copy all these links there so you can follow up with everything that Ginger shared today, including her YouTube channel, Diabetes Nerds. And you mentioned that free, it was like it was a,
Yep, it's up at the top. I'll paste it
yeah,
again. It's a 5-day email course.
yeah, there it is.
And
Yeah,
you just
blueprint.
get 5 days in a row, you get
Okay,
emails that are kind of this mini education on
okay.
exercise. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we appreciate your time. This has
Yeah.
been
Great to
really
see all
cool.
of you.
Thank you too,
Yeah.
Melissa, to you too. Yeah,
Oh, you
thank
are
you.
welcome. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. And until next time, back here in Type 1 of Midlife Membership, we'll see you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.